Well, hello everybody and welcome. So in this video I'm going to be talking about a book that I found very interesting, with the hopes that maybe you too will find it interesting and maybe you will give it a try, you will give it a read, and hopefully you will enjoy it. And so this book is written by two authors, Dossie Easton and Janet Hardy, and its title is The Ethical Slut. There are three editions to this book. The first one was published in 1997 with the subtitle A Guide to Infinite Sexual Possibilities. The second version, the second edition in 2009 with the subtitle A Practical Guide to Polyamory, Open Relationships and Other Adventures. And then there is the third edition which was published in 2017 with the subtitle A Practical Guide to Polyamory, Open Relationships and Other Freedoms in Sex and Love. And this is going to be the edition that I'm going to be reacting to. So, as you know from the title, the book is about sluts. Now, as the author say in the beginning of the book, in most of the world, slut is a highly offensive term used to describe a woman whose sexuality is voracious, indiscriminate, and shameful. They also know that slut is often meant to represent a woman because for men the equivalent word is a player, which is more about praise than shame. So basically a woman who has sex many times with many people is a slut, which is an insult, but a guy, however, is a player, and that is more of a compliment. So the book is also about addressing issues of sexism and cultural barriers that make it difficult for people to adopt certain lifestyles, like having multiple partners. That's polygamy or polyamory. And the thing is that those cultural barriers that we live with, well, they make those lifestyles difficult to adopt. But those lifestyles are in no way immoral and can be beneficial for the people who engage in them, and they even can be beneficial for everybody. And so in this sense, they want to reclaim the word slut, saying, we are proud to reclaim the word slut as a term of approval, even endearment. To us, a slut is a person of any gender who celebrates sexuality according to the radical proposition that sex is nice and pleasure is good for you. So the book is basically an apology for polyamory and polygamy. Now, polygamy means that you have multiple sex partners, and polyamory means that you love multiple partners. So you can say that the book is basically a critique of monogamy, the idea that you can love and have sex with only one person throughout your life. It is, however, important to note that the book does not reject monogamy. I mean, if people want to live in monogamous relationship, they can. The book isn't trying to force anyone into polygamy, but what the book is aiming at is to make polygamy more accepted and more accessible to people who want to experience it. And so they even have a passage in which they even praise monogamy. As they say, we nevertheless applaud monogamy as one of the infinite possibilities available to the thoughtful slut. What are the advantages of monogamy? We think they might include a way to focus your energy on just one partner instead of spreading it over several, a way to keep the decks cleared for other major responsibilities, a new baby, graduate school, a demanding career, etc., a commitment to stretch your sexual interest to meet your partner's desires rather than sending those desires outside the relationship, or the reverse, to make a willing sacrifice of some personal desires toward the well-being of the relationship. And finally, another advantage that they say you can have with monogamy is the simplicity of maintaining a straightforward calendar and not having to accommodate anyone's needs beyond yours, your partner's, and those of any dependents you might care for. They even say that in an ideal world liberated from judgment and relationships judgment about relationships, everyone would have their own monogamous phase. Like You start with sluttery during early adulthood, then monogamy during the frantic years of career building and child rearing, and then some sort of polyamory either within the original couple or as a single person post-breakup during middle age, and at last a gentle and loving wind down into a affectionate celibacy. So the author's goal isn't to tell you that monogamy is bad or that you have to have many partners. Rather, they say the only objection we have to monogamy is not the practice itself, but the widespread belief that it is your only moral choice. So they want to understand why monogamy is the only moral choice. Why is it presented as such when there can be so many other possibilities? Now, I totally agree with this statement. I believe that there are no reasons to make monogamy the standard for relationships, but I do have a problem with how they argue for their position. So the book starts by stating its problem, that many want to have an abundance of love and sex. Now, the word abundance is very significant for their philosophical purposes, so keep it in your mind. But those who try to live that way encounter many obstacles that thwart their plan and lead us to think that a slutty lifestyle is just a utopia, it's just a dream never to be fulfilled. As they say, many people dream of having an abundance of love and sex and friendship. Some believe that such a life is impossible and settle for less than they want, feeling always a little lonely, a little frustrated. Others try to achieve their dream but are thwarted by outside social pressures or by their own emotions and decide that such dreams must stay in the realm of fantasy. But others persist. As they say, a few though persist and discover that being openly loving, intimate, and sexual with many people is not only possible, but can be more rewarding than they ever imagined. And so this is what they call being an ethical slut. In short, you want to be a slut, but there are techniques and skills that you need to practice and develop in order to be an ethical slut. So there are skills about how to navigate through a culture that has many wrong ideas about sexuality and love, and other skills are about your responsibility in dealing with having multiple partners. So we can say that there are the skills of dealing with an anti-slut culture, and then the skills about being an ethical slut. So some skills about how to deal with your culture are basically skills to protect yourself against prejudice, against hateful violence, how to organize your community so that you can live the slutty lifestyle. They will also require that you make friends with lawyers because you're going to need the law on your side, because it's not rare that people who are very judgmental call the cops on you if they say many guys going in and out of your apartment, for example. It is also important to be aware of dangers of STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, and the book tells you what to do to avoid them, like communication, hygiene, self-control, and also a rigorous sexual education, regular checkings, and create more medical centers and more sensitivity programs towards sexual issues in our cultures. And then, as for the skills about being an ethical slut, it's basically respecting each other, developing self-care, knowing to set boundaries, being good at listening and at communication, have a great sense of self-control, being responsible and own up to your emotions. This is something very important, and we will go back to it. They also tell you to avoid using others for just your own egoistic enjoyment. Like, for example, don't be a collector. The authors talk about some cases where they met someone who is polyamorous, but they were just collecting people, seeing each one of their sexual relationships as some sort of a trophy. Also, don't use what you know about people who opened up to you against them. because being an ethical slut requires that you communicate a lot about your feelings, and so partners can use that against you. They also say that you have to always look for win-win situations in arguments instead of trying to figure out who wins and who loses the argument. They tell you to avoid blaming, to be honest, to value consent above all else, etc. And so you can practice all of these skills by exercises that the authors provide in the book. Like they say, if you want to practice this or that skill, we have this or that exercise for you that will help you develop that skill. Now, here I'm not going to criticize the book because I actually agree with it. We are, as human beings, we are actually polygamous creatures by nature. The narrative of monogamy is natural, is just false. And its consequences are frustration, guilt, and a lot of shame, a lot of fear, feeling trapped, and we have a lot of misconceptions about sexuality. And there is the constant pathologizing of sexual diversities and sexual orientations, as well as sexual minorities. Sexual minorities throughout history were killed, ostracized, and were locked up just for doing nothing immoral, and just because they wanted to do whatever they wanted with their bodies. So the narrative of monogamy is natural. Well, it had a lot of problems. Also, human beings have been around for 200,000 years, and it's only with the agricultural revolution that monogamy kind of became the norm. So that was about 8 to 10,000 years ago. So it is fair to say that we spent 190,000 years having multiple sex partners, but we've been monogamous for only about 10,000 years. Which you can guess kind of steered us away from the natural path that evolution was creating for us, and therefore it came with its own problems that we're still experiencing today. If you want a more scientific book that talks about how evolution made us more inclined to polygamy than monogamy, I recommend the book Sex at Dawn: How We Mate, Why We Stray, and What It Means for Modern Relationships by anthropologist Casilda Jetha, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, and Christopher Ryan. So it gives you in details what we know about our prehistoric ancestors and how we know about them to infer that they mostly lived in polyamorous and polygamous relationships, and therefore our bodies today are still made in ways to favor a lifestyle closer to our ancestors than to the monogamous model we grew up with. And so the reason why I recommend this book is because, well, it is more oriented toward scientific data, whereas the Ethical Slut, it does give a bit of scientific literature from the works of psychologists and sexologists like William Reich and Alfred Kinsey, but its focus isn't to convince you that polygamy is more natural for us than monogamy, but to give you tips about how to maintain polygamous relationships. So it's like a self-help book for people who are interested in polygamy and want to try it, or for people who are already polygamous but still don't have the proper skills to live up to the demands of that lifestyle. And so, as they argue over and over again, being an ethical slut, although it's a life of great pleasure and love connections, it also has its problems and it requires a lot of work. But they believe that developing the right skills will make it worthwhile and possible. So, to clarify what this project is about, now there are going to be two videos. The first part is, well, it's not really a review of the book, and I'm not going to give you the tips that the authors are recommending. I just mentioned the ones that I find relevant to my purpose here, or just to give you one or two examples. here I'm just more concerned with the philosophical implications rather than the practical side of the book. I mean, the book is basically giving you advices and exercises to do in order to cope with or process strong emotions, in order to have healthy communication with your partners, in the same way that a therapist or a self-help expert would do. For example, they will tell you to write down what you felt instead of just lashing out at the other person. You also have tips on how to raise children in a polygamous environment. So I recommend that you read the book if you yourself are wondering how these things can be dealt with in a polygamous environment. And if you want to practice sluthood, as they call it, well, the book is going to be a great help for you. If you want an extended review, go check the Black Ponderers review of the book, which is right here. You'll also find a long conversation between me and the Black Ponderer in the comment section about some concerns that I have with a particular issue in the book. And so this video is going to be me stressing as clearly as I can the thing that I find problematic with the author's approach to polygamy, and it is specifically a philosophical approach that I want to address here. I don't have much to say about their practical advices. I think they're great and they will be very useful to a lot of sluts and future sluts. Here I'm just going to recreate the philosophical argument, and in the next video I'm going to be criticizing it. And once I do that, me and the Black Ponderer have agreed to have a debate about my critique of the philosophical approach of the book. So stay tuned for that. Now, we will start by stating the book's main argument here. Clearly, if you want to have multiple relationships, the core of the problem is what to do with or how to handle jealousy. It is beyond obvious that jealousy is a big obstacle to polygamy, and so the author spent a lot of time talking about jealousy, and they present us with a theory about the origins and the causes of jealousy. In the second chapter, called Myths and Realities, they go over the many myths that we have about relationships and how they cannot be further away from reality. Like, we have a lot of assumptions, judgments, and beliefs about love and also about sluthood that prevent us from acknowledging the reality or the nature of relationships. Those myths are long-term monogamous relationships are the only real relationships. Romantic love is the only real form of love. Sexual desire is a destructive force. The only moral way to have sex is within a committed relationship. Loving someone makes it okay to control their behavior. Jealousy is inevitable and impossible to overcome. Outside involvements reduce intimacy in the primary relationship, and love conquers all. So we have all of these myths, and the authors argue that not only they are dangerous, but they are also untrue, and they explain why for each of them. Their arguments are, I think they are convincing, and I'm not going to disagree with them, except when they talk about jealousy. Like, my problem is just about that. It's just about how they approach jealousy. So the sixth myth, which is jealousy is impossible to overcome, they write, some people also believe that jealousy is such a shattering emotion that they have no choice but to succumb to it. People who believe this often believe that any form of non-monogamy should be non-consensual and completely secret in order to protect the betrayed partner from having to feel such an impossibly difficult emotion. So notice that the betrayed is between brackets, which suggests that the partner isn't really betrayed when you are in a polygamous relationship. when a jealous person tells you that they've been betrayed, they're basically overreacting. And so, factually, let's say they are just wrong. There was no betrayal when you have another relationship or another sexual relationship. We will go back, of course, to this. They argue that, on the contrary, we have found that jealousy is an emotion like any other. It feels bad, sometimes very bad, but it is not intolerable. We have also found that many of the oddities that lead to jealousy can be unlearned, and that unlearning them is often a useful, sometimes even profoundly healing process. So, for the authors, the myth is that jealousy is an intolerable emotion, and it is so painful and shattering that people must be protected from it at all costs. So, to this they argue that jealousy isn't as bad or as intolerable as our culture tells us it is. It is an emotion just like any other, and therefore, if there is no intolerable emotion, then jealousy can be as tolerable as, let's say, sadness or anger. And like we can learn to deal with sadness or anger, we can also learn new ways to deal with jealousy, either to cope with it when it shows up, or to avoid it altogether. Right? So far so good. But then we have to ask the question, why do we think that jealousy is so bad and so shattering? What makes jealousy be considered such a painful and intolerable emotion? For the authors, jealousy is so rooted in our culture because ever since we are kids, we are exposed to a particular belief that the authors call starvation economics. This is the roots of jealousy. This is its origins, according to the author, and all the cultural issues and problems that come with monogamy as the only moral choice that you have. Starvation economics is defined as the belief, explicitly or implicitly, that our capacities for love, intimacy, and connection are finite. That there is never enough to go around, and that if you give some to one person, you must be taking some away from another. In other words, your partner gets jealous because if they see you give love or affection to someone else, then it means that that you, the partner, that you are getting less, because there cannot be enough for everybody. Okay, so if I see my partner giving some affection to someone else, it means that I am getting less affection from my partner. In a concrete way, they say, if you love Bill, that means you must love Mary less. Or if you're committed to your relationship with your friend, you must be less committed to your relationship with your spouse. And then how do you know if you're number one in a partner's heart? So this is the big problem. The author says that we learn this belief in our childhood because our parents didn't give us the proper amount of affection or attention. So we had to imagine that there is just a limited amount of love and affection, and we have to compete with our siblings to get that affection. From here, we grow up to be, quote, very possessive about people, about things and ideas that matter to us. We see the whole world in that limited light, so that anything we get comes from a small pool of not enough, and must thus be taken from someone else. And similarly, anything anyone else gets must be subtracted from us. And therefore, we reproduce the same patterns with other lovers, or our lovers reproduce it with us through being manipulative, for example, or punitive or withholding. And so as a result, we grow up with a fear that we can never relax from being invested in the relationship, because if we let go for just a bit, if we lower our guard, if we take our mind off the relationship, then, according to the authors, we learn that if we relax our vigilance for just even a moment, a mysterious someone or something may take the love we need away from us. And so, in short, love is seen as intensive work, and that it has to be earned, and that there are basically no holidays. And so as a consequence, we develop a worldview in which we see sexuality as a commodity, something to be bought or exchanged on a market. Sexuality has a marketing value which depends on its scarcity. If there is too much of it, its value goes down. But when there is only a limited amount, when people start competing over it, and therefore the less sex is available, the higher its value. And so from childhood, boys and girls are taught to grow up with a worldview that makes them see sexuality as an object of conflict and of competition. Quote, "We live in a society where people learn some pretty warped ideas about sex. Girls learn that they are not supposed to be sexual without falling in love, and boys learn that sex is a commodity that you get from another person." And so indeed, when women can have sex only when they're in love, and if we push this thought even further, to be in love means that it happens rarely and after a long time of commitment. Because if you fall in love with a new person every day, then you get to have sex every day. But we don't want that. So not only we need to make sure that sex is scarce, we also need to make sure that love is very difficult to obtain. Okay, that you can say that you are in love with someone only after a long time of commitment, so that we can make love as scarce as sexual activity. And so, while people who endorse this are expecting to see people who value each other, like this is what they are expecting, they think that the end game is going to be where we're going to have people who value each other. What we end up with actually is creating a conception where sex has to be an achievement. And the more difficult it is to get sex, the greater the chances of having cheaters. Not as people who have affairs, but people who think that they can beat the system at its own game. In short, the authors put it this way. You may have been taught that getting laid is about getting away with something. From that point of view, having an active sexual life may look like consumerism. How much you can acquire with how little effort. Does that mean that your lover or potential lover is a commodity? And so, if you have market values when it comes to love and sexuality, you'll certainly come to associate them with power. Like getting sex or getting love is no longer about pleasure or affection or creating connections, but it's about status. And the people who are a danger to this market, those who can have multiple relationships, and so there are people who cause market values to drop, they are like people who can cause a recession. And so these are the bad ones. In other words, the sluts have to be bad because they cause a recession. Okay, they bring the market to crash. As the authors say, think about the cultural assumptions that underlie one insult thrown at women who like to have a lot of sex. Cheap. In other words, female sexuality is a commodity, and like all other commodities, is made more valuable by its rarity. So a woman who shares sex widely is reduced to her own market value. So those who rig the game, those who break its rules by daring to do what they want with their own bodies, are not just cheap and without value, but they are also immoral. Okay? In the chapter about myths, the authors give a few judgments our society has about sluts. In one of them, they are considered moral abominations. Quote, our culture also tells us that sluts are evil, uncaring, immoral, and destructive, seeking to steal something, virtue, money, or self-esteem from their partners. In some ways, this archetype is based on the idea that sex is a commodity, a coin you trade for something else, stability, children, wedding ring, and that any other transaction constitutes being cheated and betrayed. Okay? So, having a starvation economics leads us to dehumanize others. Thinking that sex is limited leads to seeing it as a commodity, which then leads us to objectify and dehumanize people, at least people who are sluts. And so the author's solution is to make a distinction between starvation economics and real world limits. So they say that some things do exist in a finite amount, like for example time, as they say that you can only have 24 hours in a day, and our problem stems from a false belief that love and affection are real world limit. Like we are confusing love, which is something that exists in abundance, with real world limits. They write, love is not a real world limit. The mother of 9 children can love each of them as much as the mother of any only child loves her own. Our belief is that the human capacity for sex and love and intimacy is far greater than most people think, possibly infinite, and that having a lot of satisfying connections simply makes it possible for you to have a lot more. Imagine what it would feel like to live in an abundance of sex and love, to feel that you had all of both that you could possibly want, free of any feelings of deprivation and neediness. So, this is the first part of their case against jealousy. It's an emotion, and it is coming from a mistake about the world. We're factually wrong about love. We think it is limited, that there is a scarcity of it, that it can only exist in rarity, while in reality there is an infinite abundance of it. And so this means that the jealous individual is coming from a place of ignorance. They were giving a wrong information about the state of the world, and not only they're mistaken about the world, but their misconception also causes harm to others, as when people ask for attention or love, they're often dismissed as wanting attention. Like they are dismissed as being drama queens, which then leads love-deprived people to feel shame and guilt for daring to ask what is theirs. And later they would also deny it for others. As they write, we recommend that everyone be open about asking for reassurance, love, hugs, comfort, and stuff like that. Many of us grew up in families where we were taught not to ask for what we needed, and if we did, we were scorned as only wanting attention. So what's wrong with wanting attention? Isn't there plenty? Remember about starvation economics. Don't shortchange yourself. So focus on abundance and create a relationship ecology rich in the good things of life. Warmth and affection and sex and love. So love and sexuality are but scarce resources. Okay, they actually exist everywhere, literally. They even have this mystical and metaphysical conception of love and sexuality that everything conveys a sexual or an erotic energy. Quote, we think erotic energy is everywhere, in the deep breath that fills our lungs as we step out into a warm spring morning, in the cold water spinning over the rocks in the brook, in the creativity that drives us to paint pictures and tell stories and make music and write books, in the loving tenderness we feel toward our friends and relatives and children, In our combined 3/4 of a century of work as sex writers and educators, we found that the more we learn about sex, the less we know about how to define it. So now we just say the truth as we know it. Sex is part of everything. And they even go as far as to say that sexuality and spirituality are deeply connected, and therefore sex can be used as a transcendenting experience, as a journey towards mindfulness and spiritual awakening. Quote, sex is connected to the spiritual. Every orgasm is a spiritual experience. Think of a moment of perfect wholeness, of yourself in perfect unity, of expanded awareness that transcends the split between mind and body and integrates all the part of you in ecstatic consciousness. When you bring spiritual awareness to your sexual practice, you can become directly conscious of, connected to that divinity that always flows through you. For us, sex is already an opportunity to see God. So basically the world is filled with sexual and erotic energy, and sexuality has a big spiritual component to it, and it exists in abundance, and not like our parents made us think. It even pervades every single object of the world, and it is even metaphysically abundant. So there is no reason for anyone to get jealous, because you can only have benefits from being able to multiply partners. And so we don't have to be in a competitive state of mind when it comes to sex and love. As they say, what we have to do is transcend competitiveness. There is enough of everything for everybody. So we have seen the first part of their argument about jealousy. It is caused by a misconception about sexuality and love, and so setting our facts straight about the world will definitely make us less jealous. However, it is clear that just having the right facts about the world doesn't entail that you will behave accordingly. This is because, so far, we looked at the cause of jealousy, but not at jealousy itself. Remember that they identify jealousy as an emotion, and emotions are well known for not really caring about the actual state of the world, because they can easily make us doubt our facts or believe wrong ones. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to condemn emotions or just to condemn the bad ones. If we adopt that kind of logic, then we will just be looking at emotions in the same way that people used to look at sexuality and sexual desire throughout history as curses to purge away because they pull us away from the right track. There is even an anecdote that they mention about Aristotle, who, when he was tutoring Alexander the Great, he got seduced by a dominatrix named Phyllis, who was the mistress of Alexander's father, and Phyllis liked to ride Aristotle like a pony. And so the anecdote is mentioned in the book to illustrate that BDSM kinks have been around since forever, but the anecdote itself is a fiction that was invented in the Middle Ages to portray the power of women's seduction, that the power of feminine sexuality can even make the greatest intellectual behave in an animalistic way. Okay, in noble ways. But this is to say that to imply that emotions in the case of jealousy ought to be controlled doesn't mean that emotions are Phyllis and that we are Aristotle. Okay, so without condemning emotions, we should acknowledge them, we should recognize their power and use them to learn more about ourselves and our culture. Okay, so we're not trying to condemn emotions or to ignore them. On the contrary, we want to use them to learn more about ourselves and find them as an opportunity to grow and learn more. So, in what way can we deal with jealousy? Now, since we've seen that the problem stems from a fear of starvation, the thing to do is, well, to let go of those fears. which the authors recognize as being one of the hardest challenges for becoming an ethical slut. Because although they say that love and sex are abundant, they also say that unfortunately we cannot promise you that the world will be generous to you. And so it kind of makes sense. Because if someone is afraid, it means that they are not sure of what will happen if they give up on that fear, right? So it is difficult to let go. Therefore, they cannot give you any guarantee, the authors cannot give you any guarantee that it is going to be just sunshine and rainbows, because being an ethical slut doesn't mean that you don't face difficulties with emotions or with negotiations or setting boundaries, etc. But they present it as a way to acknowledge those difficulties, which they think, like the moral monogamous lifestyle tries to ignore, or it tries to shield you from it. So of course it must be framed as throwing yourself into the unknown, right? Like you have to give up on your fears and accept that, well, you are stepping into the unknown. They even draw on Buddhist philosophy to explain their point, as they say, allow yourself to not know what you don't know, to be ignorant. Buddhists call this beginner's mind. And so the beginner's mind in Zen Buddhism, Chochin, means openness and a suspension of judgment when engaging in a new field of study. So basically it's when you think you know things that you don't know, all right? Like you pretend to be an expert on something while in reality you are in a new uncharted territory. So our culture tries to provide us with some knowledge to navigate the world, but when we are in an unknown part of that world, holding on to our preconceived notions, well, it can lead us to close-mindedness and to a rigidity that just will lead you to a catastrophe. So, like the new Zen student who needs to throw himself into a notion of unknown, he has to take a leap of faith in order to go on the adventure. So, polygamy can be this uncharted territory for monogamous people, and so to be an ethical slut, well, you're gonna need chochin. You need a leap of faith. And when you are thrown into this unknown, well, what safety net can you have? There is no guarantee that things will turn out okay for you or how you hoped for or imagined. So, what do you got? Well, for the authors, there's only one option. Since you have dispatched yourself from your fears and your preconceived notions of our culture that were kind of protecting you from this journey, from this big, wide unknown, the only thing that you can rely on is yourself. Okay, as they quote, is there a safety net for this kind of daredevilry? Well, yes, but it's going to require another leap of faith, because the safety net is you. Your self-reliance, your self-nurturing, your ability to spend time in your own company. So in other words, you are all that you got now. And so you must learn to be a friend to yourself. Only you can take care of you. This is the situation in which you are now. Only you can deal and cope with your own emotions, and you can count on no one else but you to get some self-nurturing. So in case you don't get it from the world of abundance, you can get it from yourself, because you too, after all, are part of that world, and so you too have an abundance within. And so the authors present an atomistic view of personhood, as stated in their third chapter, Our Beliefs. One of their beliefs is that you are already whole. And as they say, we believe that the fundamental sexual unit is one person. Adding more people to that unit may be intimate, fun, and companionable, but does not complete anybody. The only thing in this world that you can control is yourself. your own reactions, desires, and behaviors. Thus, a fundamental step in ethical sluthood is to bring your focus of control into yourself, to recognize the difference between what is yours to control and what belongs to other people. With practice, you can become able to complete yourself. That is why we call this integrity. When you have built a satisfying relationship with yourself, then you have something of great worth to share with others. So, the only thing that you have control over is yourself, which they define as your reactions to the external world, like you can choose how to react, your desires, and also your behavior. You can also add in there your emotions too. And it is only after distinguishing between what you can control and what you cannot control, and after you had integrity, meaning you can see yourself as complete, as whole, then you can have healthy relationships with multiple partners or even with just one. So the goal with this second part of the argument is therefore to make you see that your self-worth does not depend on your relationship or on who your partner is fucking. All right, you are whole and complete, which means that there is no reason for you to be badly affected by your partner's sexual activity. All right, this is certainly hard to do, but the authors provide ways to be up to the challenge. As they say, the challenge comes in learning to establish within yourself a strong foundation of safety in your relationship that is not dependent on sexual exclusivity. And so far we've seen that to get rid of the misconceptions about the world and to avoid jealousy requires integrity. That you are a complete individual and have sovereignty over yourself, since you are literally the only thing that you have power over. And so this brings us to the third part of the argument, which is about responsibility. Being the only thing you can control, everything that occurs within you is therefore your own responsibility. That is the only logical inference. If it is happening from myself, then it is part of myself, and my integrity means that I can control myself, therefore I can control my parts. So if jealousy is part of me, therefore I can control it. For the author, that's how it is. As they explicitly write, jealousy is not a cancer that you can cut out. It is part of you, a way that you express fear and hurt. What you can do is change the way you experience jealousy and learn to deal with it as you learn to deal with any emotion. So jealousy isn't something that affects me from the outside world, but it is something that comes from within. Quote, jealousy is an emotion that arises inside you. No person and no behavior can make you jealous. Like it or not, the only person who can make that jealousy hurt less or go away is you. So this means that jealousy is not natural, but it is more of a social construction. We feel jealous because of how we have constructed the world, because of how we were told that the world functions. And therefore, if, as they say, if you believe that jealousy is natural rather than a social construct, it is easy to use it as a justification to go berserk and stop being sane, responsible, and an ethical human being. So a natural approach to jealousy makes it seem like jealousy is beyond our control, that it is something that happens to us rather than by us. In the case of cheating, one of the myths tells us that we are jealous because something happened to us, because our partner, when they had an affair, when they had someone else, they did something to us. Okay, so my partner did that to me, my partner is the cause of my jealousy, and therefore my partner should do something about it. All right, as they say, as the author says in the chapter, Slut Skills, owning your own emotions. When you feel rotten, it can be hard to accept the responsibility for how you feel. Wouldn't this be easier if it were someone else's fault? The problem is that when you blame someone else for how you feel, you disempower yourself. If this is someone else's fault, only that person can fix it, right? So poor you, who can't do anything but sit there and moan. So this kind of thinking is wrong for the authors, because your partner who cheated isn't really responsible for the way you feel. First, as they said in the beginning of the book, what makes one person jealous doesn't really make another. So, like for example, if you're something can make you jealous, but another person can be very okay with it. Okay, it doesn't make jealous another person. So if you're jealous, it's not because of an act, but because we made ourselves jealous. Since we have control over ourselves, we also control our jealousy, and so we choose to be jealous. As they write, the basic precept of intimate communication is that each person owns their own feelings. No one makes you feel jealous or insecure. The person who makes you feel that way is you. No matter what the other person is doing, what you feel in response is determined inside you. Even when somebody deliberately tries to hurt you, you make a choice about how you feel. When you own your feelings, you have lots of choices. You can talk about how you feel, you can choose whether or not you want to act on those feelings, you can learn how to understand yourself better, you can comfort yourself or ask for comfort. So, if you are responsible for your jealousy, and jealousy is a destructive emotion, then the person who is jealous has the moral responsibility of keeping that jealousy in check. And once they do, they can learn from their feelings and ask for comfort. Not for payback, they can only ask for comfort. If you ask for payback, you're acting out on jealousy. And we've established that's kind of bad. Like morally bad, since for the authors, acting out on jealousy means that you are trespassing on someone else's space. You're invading someone else's privacy and rights to do what they want with their bodies. Quote, owning your feelings is basic to understanding the boundaries of where you end and the other person begins, and the perfect first step towards self-acceptance and self-love. So, I think it is quite clear. If you are jealous, it means that you neither accept yourself nor love yourself. You simply have abandonment issues. That's why you are jealous. Any jealous person who is pushed in their lamentations always turn out to be anxious at the idea of being abandoned by their partners. Quote, jealousy may be an expression of insecurity, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, or feeling left out, not good enough, inadequate, or awful. So that's what jealousy is. It's just a bunch of awful emotions. As they say, jealousy is not a single emotion. It can show up as grief or rage, hatred or self-loathing. Jealousy is an umbrella word that covers the wide range of emotions we might feel when our partners make sexual connection with someone else. So, the emotions don't arise because of the partner. They arise when they make relationship with others, but not because of them, right? Your jealousy arises when your partner is having connections with other people, but that does not mean that the jealousy is happening because of the partner. So the rage, the hatred, the self-loathing has its cause elsewhere. They are caused by insecurities, by fear of being abandoned. So basically, it's a psychological trauma that is making you jealous. It has nothing to do with your partner seeing other people. So when you feel jealous, you should not blame it on your partner, but listen to your own emotions because they're telling you something about yourself and that you have unresolved issues and you've been avoiding them. To quote the authors, jealousy is often the mask worn by the most difficult inner conflict you have going on right now. A conflict that's crying out to be resolved and you don't even know it. Because it's rooted so deeply, it can be incredibly difficult to stay conscious when jealousy peaks over the horizon. We twist and turn in our attempts not to feel it. This is when your emotions are most likely to bring you to grief when you believe that you need to avoid feeling them at all costs. So, to take an example that is narrated by Dossie, so one of the authors, Dossie, for example, recalls a memory with one of her partners who felt that way. If Dossie has other partners, it means that there is something wrong in our relationship or something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not good enough for her. Maybe she's going to leave me. And so her partner is looking for ways not to feel those things instead of just accepting them and simply wait for them to pass because they're simply not true. Dossie is not abandoning or leaving her partner or loves her less because she is having sex with another guy or another girl. The issues are other than that. Jealous people want to protect themselves from those emotions. Okay, they protect their emotions onto their polygamous. They want to protect themselves by projecting their emotions onto their polygamous partners as a way to avoid or to deny those feelings. As they say, projection is a psychological defense that involves trying to move a painful feeling outside yourself by running your emotional movie on someone else, as if that person were a screen for your fears and fantasies. It may be that this is the only real definition of jealousy. It's the experience of projecting one's uncomfortable feelings onto one's partner. So here you have a straight up definition of jealousy. It's the experience of projecting one's uncomfortable feelings onto one's partner. So it is a straight up denial of your emotions. And some jealous people can even go as far as deny that they are jealous. They deny their own jealousy. A jealous partner may tell you that they are not jealous when they obviously are, because it makes them come off as insecure or scared. So they try to deny those feelings by saying that they are not jealous. And this can be a very bad way to deal with jealousy, because according to the authors, when your partner tells you that you are jealous, you have to own it for many reasons. They say, if you try to pretend that you are not jealous when you are, others may believe you and see no need to support or protect you, because you're fine, right? Or they may conclude that you are failing to take responsibility for your own emotions, and when you deny your jealousy to yourself, you take from yourself the opportunity to be compassionate with yourself, to offer yourself some support and comfort. So reason number one, if you deny your jealousy, well, your partner can believe you, and they're gonna be like, well, you're fine, then I don't have to comfort you or support you or anything. Or well, you fail to take responsibility for your emotions, and then you also fail to be a friend to yourself. You fail to even comfort yourself. So the rationale behind this is that when we feel jealous, we are being vulnerable. And since you are supposed to be your own friend, denying your jealousy is also denying your own vulnerability. And if you don't think you are vulnerable, you'll fail to practice being your own friend or give yourself some comfort on your own. And so you'd simply expect the other person to take care of you, but you also have to learn to take care of yourself. And so our culture makes it a bad thing for people to feel sorry for ourselves. Okay? But the authors remind us that it's okay to be vulnerable and to learn some self-love and self-care instead of expecting others to fit into your narrative of what's an ideal relationship so that you don't confront your inner demons. As they say, this is hard and you're struggling, so be kind to yourself. Like they acknowledge that it is a struggle, and that's why they say, you know, you have to be kind to yourself. And so not only this is good for you to address your jealousy and feelings, it is actually good for maintaining the relationship that you are scared to lose. Because if you don't address your fears, you'll be living in fear. And as the authors stress, new neurological studies show something really interesting. Fear cannot coexist with gratitude. So if you're feeling scared or insecure, try remembering 3 things you're grateful for and see if anything shifts. And so basically what they say is relationships cannot work without gratitude. If you're jealous, it means that you are scared. And since fear cannot coexist with gratitude, well, your relationship is not going to work, since relationships require gratitude in order to work. So it is also important to know that relationships work not based on admiring qualities but sharing vulnerabilities with your partner. As the authors say, when we tell our partners that we feel jealous, we are making ourselves vulnerable in a very profound way. So if you act out on jealousy, you'll just ruin your relationship. That's why the authors put a lot of emphasis on refusing to act on your feelings if they are destructive. They say acting out means doing things that you don't understand, driven by emotions you have refused to be aware of in ways you may regret later. Once you have made a commitment to refuse to act on your jealousy, you become free to start reducing the amount of power you let it have over you. So, nothing good can come out of jealousy, and therefore you must be the one in control instead of letting it control you. Quote, when you hold still with your jealousy, you will find that it is possible to feel something difficult without doing anything you don't choose to do. You will have taken your second step at disempowering your jealousy. You've told your jealousy that you will not allow it to drive you to do anything that might destroy your loving relationships. So, as you can see, there is nothing legitimate about jealousy. Not only it makes you do stupid things and ruin loving relationships that were not broken and were perfectly fine, it also holds up in front of your eyes a wrong representation of the world. So, with jealousy, you are both stupid in action and also in intellect. And all you did was nothing but projecting unprocessed emotions on your partners because you have false beliefs about your partner's actions. So it means that jealousy is just a problem of perception. Our culture has told us how to perceive certain actions. Actions don't have meaning on their own, they need to be interpreted in order to become meaningful. So if our culture equates cheating with losing something, whenever our partner has another relationship, it means that we are losing something. As they say, you may feel that the sense of loss you may feel can be the loss of an ideal, a picture you have been holding on in your head of what a perfect relationship might look like. And so as a way to solve this, the person experiencing jealousy can simply change their perception of the partner's action and create a more accurate representation of relationship and see them as what they really are, see relationships as what they really are. As the authors say, all relationships change through time. people's needs and desires shift according to age and circumstance, and the most successful long-term relationships are the ones with enough flexibility to redefine themselves over and over again through the years. So you're going to need to change your perception about actions that trigger in you some reactions, and you also need adequate ideas about the nature of relationships. How can you do that? Well, there's no easy path to it. As the author say, changing the way you experience a feeling takes time. So expect a gradual process, learning as you go by trial and error. But then, that's what the practical side of the book is for. You can practice this change by the things, through the things that they give you in the book, like for example exercises of taking care of yourself. They say if you practice taking good care of yourself, after a while your view of the world changes a bit, and it becomes a much more friendly and welcoming place, because you've created it that way. Or you can just do the exercises that they give you, okay? Because those exercises can give you perspective. Like for example, quote, pay attention also to your imaginings that are less dangerous, that they are less anxiety-ridden. You may be surprised to find that imagining your lover in the midst of sex with someone else is less scary than you thought it would be. Or maybe images of kissing bother you more than intercourse or whatever. But then if these practices are to help you deal with jealousy, it doesn't mean that only monogamous people are jealous. This is also aimed at ethical sluts. Polygamous people also feel jealousy, and they therefore need these exercises as well, so not to infringe on the rights of their partners. This means that ethical sluts need also to be attentive to their partner's jealousy. This means that you cannot be indifferent or cynical towards your partner's feelings, especially jealousy, but you have to be sympathetic and understanding, because even an ethical slut experiences these feelings, and therefore they need powerful bonds between each other. So keep in mind that an ethical slut isn't someone who is just after their own pleasures, but must also consider the well-being of others, especially their partners. They aim at creating communities of people living peacefully and with shared strong bonds together. As they write, non-monogamy could facilitate the formation of kinship networks, communities bound together by the intimacies of their sexual connections, perhaps serving the same functions as villages did in a smaller world. Some of us have even taken to referring to our groupings as tribes. And so in tribes, sometimes they refer to themselves as families also. In tribes, people need to be attentive to each other's needs. This means that you cannot just ignore the jealousy of your partner. This doesn't mean that you have to cancel your date with Tom, for example, when your partner Mark is jealous, but you have to do what you can before leaving to reassure Mark as much as you can. Remember that people who are engaged in a polygamous tribe don't necessarily see each other all the time. They work, they have families, they have activities, they have commitments, they have friends, kids, etc. So scheduling dates can be difficult. Therefore, canceling a date can be a little bit taboo in these communities and in these circumstances. But again, you have many ways to deal with these agreements, like the book says. But the point is, your ethics as an ethical slut also extends to others for practical reasons. The cohesion of the members of the tribe relies on that, but also because not helping your partner through their phases of jealousy can become a way for you to avoid your own emotions of guilt, for example, instead of facing them. To quote the authors, they say, sometimes when a lover is jealous and in pain, we may find it easier to feel angry and push that person away than to stay close, staying in empathy, listening and caring. When we blame this person for being jealous, what we're really saying is that we cannot stand to listen to how much our beloved hurts when when we are on the way out the door to play with someone else. This seeming indifference is a crummy way to avoid dealing with your own guilt. So when Dossie was listening to her partner's jealousy, for example, she also has to put up with it. Okay, and it's a lot to put up with. It has heartbreaking moments because Dossie cannot really talk back at her partner because, well, an ethical slut doesn't try to invalidate your feelings, but simply tries to help you cope with them. So Dossie is being insulted and yelled at, and she just refuses to defend herself. And she takes all of it. She just tries to remind her partner that she loves her and that the fact that she has another relationship doesn't mean that she loves her any less. Because abundance, right? So, because patronizing someone goes against their ethical codes, ethical sluts must be ready to face constant fighting from partners who experience jealousy. But by making it clear, monogamy is off the table. Like fixing the situation, that's not an option. Okay, so an ethical slut will not abandon you, but not abandoning you doesn't necessarily mean for an ethical slut what for a jealous monogamous person think it means. All right. So the limits of the ethics we're talking about here is I just offer you a space where you can express your feelings, how hurt you feel, and help you cope with them. I can help you accept them, help you to learn how to love yourself, but that's it. Okay? Like, I'm not going to stop fucking other people. We just put up with it, and that's it. That's it. But each one in our own way, of course, and we put up with it in our own separate ways. So the ethical slut puts up with it by listening, while the jealous person puts up with it by toughening it up, for example. You just suck it up, and that's it. It's actually one of their skills that they advocate to tough it up. When you learn that your partner is seeing other people, you just hang there, waiting until she or he comes back. As they say, there is nothing wrong with gritting your teeth, biting the bullet, and hanging in there until it's over. So this is, of course, difficult to apply for both parties. Both the jealous one, as much as the person who has another date, the jealous has to suck it up, while the other must listen, even if it hurts, and neither will try to fix anything because, well, there's nothing to be fixed. There's nothing broken. This is not a broken relationship or anything. These are just feelings, and they will eventually go away. As they say, you don't have to fix anything. All you have to do is listen to yourself or another and understand that this hurts, period. So if that's the price of uncompromising our freedom, then be it. Yeah, it's going to hurt like hell, and when we are in pain, we are eager to find who's responsible for it and blame them and hurt them, because maybe that's what we want. Maybe we just want to hurt others because we were hurt and we never got a chance to rectify things, so we just wait for the first opportunity. We just wait for someone to fuck up so that we can finally get to hurt someone and feel like it was legit and deserved. Problem is, like the author say, you hurt a lot, so surely it must be somebody's fault, but sometimes there is great pain and there is no villain. And so the best thing to do is to make yourself as comfortable as possible and just wait. Alright, so that was the third part of the argument. Sorry if it's a little bit long, I know, but I don't want to misrepresent their argument because in the next video we're going to be criticizing it. I mean, to see where what kind of problems does it have. But yeah, so this is the third part of the argument. So, all right, so that's it. I hope you enjoy this, and I hope this will make will make you want to check out the book. And also don't forget to check out the Black Ponderers video, and I will see you next time for a critique of the